Hello, I am Jason Andera. Brian Haenchen has always wanted to be on TV, and now he doesn't get to be on TV. He gets to be on the internet.
Wow.
Brian Haenchen, Argus Leader Media.
Way to go. Nice job.
Thank you.
Craig Mattick, KWSN Radio here in Sioux Falls, and it is time to talk about postseason basketball, SoDak 16 basketball, where 16 teams are left in Class B girls, Class AA girls, and Class AA boys. We're going to break down those brackets right now. Let's start with the girls, Class B, SoDak 16. There's a look at what we've got for coming up Thursday night. Any of those games interest you? Craig, what do you see that you
I'm
like?
always looking at the seeds that are the closest, because typically 1 versus 16, I don't expect Dupree to give Ethan any kind of a run at all. So you look at the closer ones, the New Underwood, White River, that one is a toss-up. They played recently and it was a very close game. But for the most part, if there's going to be a possible upset, I think number 11, number 6. I think Avon and Freeman, they haven't played each other this year, but I think that one could be very interesting.
What do you think, Brian?
I agree. Avon, you can't overlook them, especially with a player like Lauren sees. Bridgewater Emory, maybe they can give Ipswich a little bit of trouble. They'll be an interesting game to watch. But I'm ready to get to the state tournament because I want to see how Ethan fares against a team like Warner if they should meet again. They're in the semifinals. You have DeSmet, you have Corsica Stickney in the 8th grader, Avery Broughton over there. So there's some fun little matchups and some fun teams to keep an eye on there once we get beyond Thursday night.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting stuff going on in Class B this year. We've had real star heavy with Chloe Lamb and some of these Maya Sellens, but this year I think it's maybe a little bit more wide open as far as the star power goes, even though Ethan has really established themselves as the team to beat, I believe. All right, let's talk about Friday night coming up with the SoDak 16 Part 2. We are talking South Dakota Class AA girls matchup, and O'Gorman comes in as the number 1 seed. Here's a look at the brackets again. Craig, your first thoughts when you see these matchups on Friday night?
I don't expect a lot of changes at all. I think the higher seeds are going to win this one. Wait till we get to that state tournament where you have the top 8, because O'Gorman and Harrisburg and Lincoln, they have pretty much split amongst each other. Brandon Valley, you mix them in there as well. You know, Mitchell and Sturgis, the 8-9 seed, again, that's always a toss-up because of that one. But if there is going to be an upset, I think you look at the 7-10 seeds, Rapid City, Stevens, and Yankton. The Gazelles have played some pretty good games this year, and if they're going to give Stevens, they could give them a run for their money.
What do you think?
Took the words right out of my mouth. Yankton's definitely a sleeper, not just in the SoDak 16, but also beyond into the state tournament potentially. Another team, they're not in that bottom 8, but another team to watch is Mitchell. They've played some good teams really close. You look at Lincoln, they played them really close. That's a game that jumps out right away.
Beat Washington last week, I think.
Yeah. And then Washington, their group that we discussed, they kind of get overlooked in this because they lost some big pieces from last year. It took them, a little bit maybe at the start of the season to get going, but they picked off Lincoln early in the year. They've hung with O'Gorman. They're an interesting team, or they beat O'Gorman, for Jamie Parrish's 200th win. They'll be an interesting team to watch, and with the size that they have, they could cause some real problems come state tournament time.
Yeah, that's well said. I think there's always a few upsets, even though it looks like it could just go chalk. There's always 1 or 2 things that don't go the way it's planned. Before we get to the boys, we saw on Tuesday night some of the seeds that were still open in AA finally get solidified. That takes us to our game of the week. We had Roosevelt take on Lincoln in the Lincoln gym, second time that they've played this year, and Lincoln came out and they played a really good game. I think, what were your impressions? You were at the game, Brian.
Yeah, defensively, that was probably the best that I've seen Lincoln look all year. They did a great job of just clogging the middle. They forced Roosevelt into taking a lot of 3-pointers. And early on, those 3-pointers, they're a few feet behind, or not a few feet, but a few steps behind the arc. There's some space between them and the arc where they're jacking up these 3-pointers because Lincoln was just so good inside. That was impressive to see. Defense loosened up a little bit towards the end, which allowed Roosevelt to come in. Free throw shooting woes for Lincoln also. Let things get a little bit closer than they probably should have been down the stretch. But the other really big takeaway, and this is the thing to watch as we move forward through March, is that Lincoln won last night, and they won pretty big with Jared Jaros only putting up 8 points, and with Jared Jaros only having 4 points through the majority of that game. Obviously, he's going to bounce back and perform down the stretch, but if you can continue getting production from Nate Breck, from some of the other guys that they have in that lineup, just picking their spots and putting up points, Lincoln's going to be a really dangerous team.
Yeah, any thoughts on Lincoln?
Totally agree.
Yeah.
If Jaros has an off night or is really being double teamed, whatever, tough defense against him. But the other guys come through and get it done. That makes Lincoln that much tougher.
Nate Brecht in particular inside. I mean, if they can get that big guy going and just keep feeding him the ball inside, and you pop it out to Jaros for some open looks and he can drive to the basket too. I mean, that's just such a rich, diverse offense.
Yeah, they're an impressive team. They've had a couple of letdowns this year, just the 2 losses, one to T and then one to O'Gorman just a week or so ago. But other than that, they've been the most consistent team in a field that's been pretty inconsistent. And it's hard to tell which team's going to show up some nights, but if they play like they did last night, I think they're pretty good.
That pass that Jaros had too, where over the shoulder, no look to Brecht. I mean, that's one where you just sort of, you take a step back and you laugh because it was just so ridiculous.
Yeah, not many people have players that can do that. Let's look at that bracket in the AA ranks now that it's been finalized on Tuesday night. This is what we're looking at for SoDak 16 matchups. Last year, we had a few really good SoDak 16 matchups, including the 2 teams that ended up making it to the finals, Harrisburg and Yankton, slipping by their SoDak 16 matchups. Are there any here that really jump off the page for you, Craig?
Maybe Brian and I are different on this one, but Watertown Huron. You think Huron's got a chance to take out Watertown? I don't, because I think Watertown is the hottest team almost in AA, because Watertown has beaten Yankton. They have beaten Brandon Valley. They've won 6 in a row. I like the way that Watertown is playing. They should beat Huron.
I think Huron is a dark horse because of Kobe Bush and some of the other pieces that they have in that team. Kids that maybe rise to the occasion and shine in March, sort of like Yankton had last year. Obviously not to the caliber of Matthew Morris, but that same sort of dynamic where you have a standout player that can make some noise and lead a team on their own. So that'll be fun to watch. Then obviously you have Central and Stevens playing for a state tournament berth, which should be a really fun chapter for that rivalry to determine who gets to come out or who gets to go over and play for a state title.
At least they'll have some home representation out in Rapid City with the winner of that game. And then Sturgis has a chance to stay out West River too with a close game against Harrisburg, who just made the state finals last year. And that's the 8-9 matchup. That's one that always is an interesting one as well. Other than that, though, I don't see a lot that could probably go the other way. Mitchell's another team, even though they're a 16 seed, they have that feeling about them where if they hit some 3-pointers, they can make it competitive.
Mitchell went to the wire against O'Gorman. It was a 2-point ball game, and they've had a lot of close games. We talked recently that we thought, if there's a team that is going to have an upset, could it be Mitchell? And we, unfortunately,
tough draw, but
Mitchell's been close in a lot of games.
Roosevelt will have to get through Washington. I talked to Washington's coach Craig Nelson at Brandon Valley, just sort of shooting the breeze a little bit, and he thinks, I asked him, between Stevens, between Washington, or between Roosevelt, which do you like? And he thinks that they can match up a little bit with Roosevelt. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. That'll be a fun game.
Well, for continuing coverage on high school basketball, make sure to follow Brian Haenchen and Craig Mattick. Craig Mattick, of course, on the call for the state championship games coming up in Huron and in Rapid City the following week. So we're going to leave you with a look at some of the best dunks that we had over the last couple weeks sent in by our viewers. Last Thunder report of the regular season. Let's see who checks in this week. We got some footage from Rapid City Central. Elijah Williams going across the lane with the turnaround slam. Great acrobatic move by Elijah Williams. He's pumped up, and of course, so are we. We love dunks. And then his teammate Joe Woods gets the steal in the backcourt. The sub-6-footer goes sky high for the slam. Rapid City Central definitely getting some dunking done. And then another team that was dunking was Brandon Valley. The steal against Douglas for the sophomore Jackson Hilton, and he skies for the slam. I have a feeling we'll see a lot of dunks from this guy before his career is over. And then Carter Altoff doing the same thing with the pick, and then he rocks it back. Look at this. Rocks it back and puts it through the hoop. Carter Altoff, a serious vertical jump, showing it off right there. And then how would you like to have this guy as your receiver? On the alley-oop, slam, and more slamming.